That moment when you start recording and you start making a scene in a 3D modeling program, you look back at your recording and you realize you didn't actually hit the record button. That's very helpful. I'm OberZine. As you can see, I'm not actually playing a game. I'm going to be showing you a very short / brief tutorial on how to create a simple basic 3D scene using a technique to cheat a way to render very quickly using like a cheating method to render shadows and camera angles in 3ds Max. It sort of applies to other 3D modeling programs. If you understand how to use another 3D modeling program, this may help you, but for this tutorial it's just Autodesk 3ds Max 2016. The tutorial in this will apply across pretty much all Autodesk 3ds Max products, like the whole range of their Autodesk suite at 3ds Max. They do offer other Autodesk programs, but I don't use them programs. I use 3ds Max. So we're going to start off with a simple object. We're going to go to a box, create a very simple box, just like that, and we're going to move this along. So it's in sort of the center of the scene. We don't really need to worry about where it is in the scene. And then we're going to zoom out a little bit. And then we're going to right click on it. Click Convert to Editable Poly. Now, I know I'm going very fast, but you guys can pause on a YouTube video, believe it or not. So let's click Convert to Editable Poly. Then we're going to click Element, which is next to Polygon, just there. And then click the whole thing, and it will automatically select all the faces. We click on Flip. That will turn it inside out. Then we're going to click Polygon. We're going to select top face. Then press the delete key on your keyboard. Deletes that. Delete that face. Delete that face. We're going to zoom back in. So then we got sort of the corner image just about there in our window. It's just here. So I know my face is covering up the bottom left hand side, but there's nothing really important apart from rendering time. You will kind of see the rendering time while this video is going on, because I will put times the speed that it's rendering by, simply because I'm going to be fast forwarding, because I'm utilizing 10 cores instead of 12, because my recording program is using 12 cores instead of using 2 cores instead of the full 12. Complicated to set up that, but it's set up now, so yeah, make do with it. I'm making do with it. Moving on, we're going to create another object. We're going to create a torus, and we're going to create it just there, just like that. Very simple. We're going to press W, or you can press up there where it says select and move, which is what it says, select and move. You can move the object just there. We're going to have it just like that. May resize it. Actually, let's move it back to about there. We're going to add a sphere. Let's add a sphere. Have it just there, man. We're gonna have it just there. We're gonna move that up a little bit. There you go. We're gonna add a teapot to the scene. Teapot is gonna go just there. We're gonna rotate that by pressing E on the keyboard, or you can press select and rotate. Now we're gonna make sure that the snap button is on. The snap button is just at the top, just there. Now you just click that, and it will snap it to 5-degree angles. So as you can see, it's going up in 5% increments. We're gonna have it facing sort of that, maybe that direction. Let's have it just there, facing just like that. Actually, I'm going for the middle. I want it facing through that gap there. No idea why, but looks kind of good like that. So next thing we're gonna add is a light. The light that we're gonna add is a target spotlight. I kind of like them because it creates a target spotlight. Kind of self-explanatory, really, for what it really does. I press W. So then we can move the actual point of origin of the light, but the focus point stays at the same point. As you can see, I'm rotating the light, but it's still hitting the object, even though I'm moving the light. So what we're going to do is turn it so it's kind of, we're going to move also the focus point sort of kind of to the center. And then we're going to move the object of the actual light to around about there-ish. Yeah, that feels comfortable. And then we're going to change the multiplier. That's usually set to 1, but we're going to change it to 0.7. You're going to select the color that you want. I'm going to go for a sort of yellowish color. It's usually set to a sort of a lighter sort of yellow. I'm going to choose it to a darker sort of yellow. And we're going to change how, no, we're not going to change how near. We're going to choose how far it can reach. Now we're going to bring that in to around about there. And starting point is going to be about there. That's fine. No, that's not fine. We don't need to worry about that then. So far everything's looking good on there. I'm going to scroll up a little bit. So affect areas. Don't want ambient only on. That would be a bit pointless. We want to make sure that light affects shadow color. We want to make sure that's turned on. So the reason you want to have a light effect shadow color on, simply because the light will affect the shadow color. So when the light bounces off an object, it will bounce off the object and bounce off other objects and so on. That's mainly reflection and sort of other things, which we'll look into. I'll show you these bits as well. That's part of the rendering technique that I'm going to show you. But when it creates a shadow, the shadow will be perfectly bland. But then the other objects that are near it will also be reflecting the light and refracting light. So it will be bouncing into that shadow. Now, if you're just going to have it plain and simple, the shadow will still look bland, but it will be slightly lighter because it's reflecting light onto that shadow. So the shadow won't be as dominant. So it will be reflecting the color of the object. Now, I'm thinking we should leave the objects this color, but we're going to change the floor. Now, I think we should change the floor to... I'm going to say... I don't even know what color we should change it. You know what? Let's go back to the light quickly. Make sure shadow's turned on. Very helpful if shadow is turned on. Shadow isn't turned on. We're going to make sure we click ray trace shadows or mental ray. It's your choice. Now, one of these will perform better than the other. Depends how you set it up. So we're going to choose a simple one, mental ray shadow map. It's already basically pre-configured because I've just set it up in area shadow maps. Basically the same principle of what I've set up. I haven't really changed much. This is the only bit I'm going to change in mental ray shadow map. I'm going to change this to 1024. So that's double 512. So 1024. There we go. Sample range, we're going to increase that to 0.1. That will stop the shadow map being jagged edges. Like, I don't know whether you've seen in some games where you get like jittering shadows. Doesn't look particularly good. That's anti-aliasing for you though. But we're going to change that to 0.1. That will make it look slightly better. Transparent shadows, we want that because we're going to create a transparent object in our scene. We're going to make sure that's enabled. Sample pixel, leave that all just like normal. Indirect illumination, don't really need any of that. Like, just leave that default. And same with that. No, we haven't got anything to configure there. I'm going to scroll back down, just double check. Now we're going to enable the shadows. Make sure that's enabled. Like, I keep forgetting to enable that. So that's enabled now. So now we've enabled that. We're going to quickly render the scene. Press F9 on the keyboard. That renders the scene. Very basic scene. You know why? Because we haven't set up the actual sort of renderer as such. We're using a default scanline renderer. Now, it can be helpful in times when you just want to see the basics of what your scene's going to look like. It renders so quickly. Like, that's pretty quick for the objects that are in the scene. There's only 2,500 polygons. The reason there's so many polygons is because the sphere, the torus, and the teapot take up the majority of the polygons. The square, the box, takes up 3 polygons. It's got 3 faces to it. It's got a floor, wall, and wall. Yeah, we deleted 3 of the other faces. So there's not many polygons in that scene. So the sphere is taking up tons of polygons. Basically, a sphere is a box that's been rounded off. So if you can imagine, all of these lines here, these squares, have sort of been rounded. And the polygon isn't perfectly spherical. As you can see there, it's actually got jittered edges, but it looks as round as it's possibly going to get. But anyway, moving on from that, you can see the scene's just there. We're just going to quickly render that to see if it's in the scene. Yep, there's no shadows. So what we're going to do is create an actual material for each object. We're going to create one for the torus first, and as you can see, I've already got a preset. And we're going to choose a get material. We're going to choose architectural, and then we're going to close this window. We're going to choose, what do we choose? I'm going to choose glass, translucent. So now we've got translucent glass. We could have translucent or we can have clear. You know what, let's go for clear. Like, it's something slightly different. We're just going to see what that looks like in default scanline, it doesn't look like anything because we haven't applied the material. Assign material to selection. That's important. So now we've got a transparent object. Doesn't look particularly great, does it? That's because it's not enabled properly. Two-sided. So now we've created that. It doesn't look particularly great. And I think I stopped recording, so there won't be a few cuts here and there. But just to make do with that, you can see it looks slightly better now because we now enabled two-sided shadows. Two-sided shadows just there. We can have it illuminating its own light. Don't particularly want to do that. The next material we're going to add is to the sphere. The sphere. We're going to add this material because it's metal. And again, we go to architectural. That's my favorite sort of materials in standard. You can add your own materials by going to standard, bitmap, and then it brings up a window and you literally just choose which material you want. I have no idea what that is. I think that's meant to be a face, but that's UV wrapping. I don't mess around with UV wrapping. I let that down. I let that, like, the professional people do UV mapping. I do the 3D modeling and environmental sort of scenes. I don't do sort of mapping of materials. I just generally apply default materials as it is, but you can apply other materials. So you can add like you can search up like tile mapping, and that's where it's an ever-ending tile. So no matter how many times it's repeating across a scene, it will sort of integrate itself perfectly. That sort of never-ending pattern. I don't know what the word is. That's just completely gone from my brain. But we don't need to add that. I don't need to add a bitmap. So what we're going to choose is architectural. Just make sure that's selected. And we're going to choose metal polished. We're actually going to choose metal brushed. I like that material a lot more. I don't know why, but it's just something about it. And our material has seemed to disappear completely from the scene. Then we're going to click render. Because we haven't applied it to the object, we've got to remember to apply it. Apply. Now we've got it applied. Don't like that one. So we're going to change it to polished. Now let's try it. Looking better. Now it's reflecting objects. Still not as great as I want it to be, but we're getting there. This, we want to change colour. We're going to change this to bright green. Oh, bright green. Yeah, why not? Bright green. Now we got bright green object. That'll do me. So with material, the red material, this is ceramic in architectural again. You've already seen me do that. So ceramic tile glazed. I'm going to choose red. That's bright red. The brightest red you can get in this. So we can choose that. Make sure it's selected two-sided. And same with the other object. We're going to apply it to the teapot actually, just to make sure. Remember to apply. You literally click assign material to selection. Select your object and apply it. And then with that, just make sure that everything's there, two-sided. Just double check that. And we're gonna just quickly render this, see what it looks like. Pretty stand forward. Yes, standard like rendering. But that's just to give us sort of an example of what it actually looks like. So now, if I press F10, it's going to bring up a rendering window, and it's also going to stop my animation, recording. So we're going to click on rendering, and we're going to click render setup, which brings up the rendering setup window. If you press F10, same thing as just clicking rendering. Just saw me do that, but it's on default scanline renderer. We want a view to render. It's quad 4, which is going to be down here, and that's perspective. Now we're going to set up a camera in a minute. I'll show you later. And output size, you can leave it default, but there's no point because the majority of videos on YouTube, if you're uploading to YouTube, will require you to upload it in HD if you want it decent quality. So we're going to choose 720p, and that's going to render out a scene, a frame, that's in 720p. We're going to click on Compute Advanced Lightering, just there, when required. That will increase the rendering time a little bit, not too much though. You don't want to click anything there unless you really want super black, and that will literally stop the pixels from rendering completely. Like, it does save a little bit of rendering time, but you don't really need to enable that. So we're going to just go up here. If you want to render an animation, you'll have to watch my other videos later on if you want me to continue making videos like this on how to make an animation. And I will keep this scene saved and animate objects in this. For example, like a teapot maybe lifting up and pouring. I probably won't have it pouring any liquids because that's complicated stuff. You will need to watch other videos that will show you that, because there's plugins available. Don't have them plugins enabled because I'm just showing you the basics. But we're going to click on renderer, which is up here. We're going to click on mental ray, not NVIDIA mental ray. I do have an NVIDIA graphics card in my computer. I am using the graphics card because my other graphics card, which is by AMD, is broken. It is now a paperweight, and for some reason the warranty is not being sorted on it. I am in the process of trying to sort it with them, but that's another story. So we're going to click on mental rate. If you've got an NVIDIA graphics card, choose iRay. It's a billion times faster. But for now, mental rate. Quicksilver is just a hardware-based renderer. It uses your graphics card. Not as good at rendering, but it's quick. It is very quick. Like, first time it's not quick, but multiple times it's very quick. It's not as good as translating objects like that are transparent like that. Apparently that's invisible in the scene just here, but it's definitely there. We can see it when we highlight over it. We can click on F4 and that will bring up wireframe mode, so we can see it completely, but we don't really want that. It looks tedious. We're going to click on renderer. Going to make sure everything's defaulted there. So usually on the old versions of 3ds Max below 2016, they have classic ray traced enabled by default. You can't change it. It is literally ray traced on mental ray. It's usually on here on default scanline renderer by default. When you change it to mental ray, and it's always on classic, it takes forever to render, but the scene looks amazing. So we're going to leave it on unified ray traced recommended. It gives a fairly decent result when making a scene. Don't need to enable anything in this scene just here. Everything's pretty much standard. Processing. We need to change this. If you've got low RAM, I've got 64 gigs RAM. I don't need to click it. If you've got low RAM, click this button, conserve memory. It will literally save you a ton of RAM. You won't get the RAM sort of maxed out window appearing, which happens quite often. I've seen it happen to mine. So geometry caching, if you're making an animation, this will be amazing. Because if you've got objects that you think are perfect in a scene that you haven't changed for a while, that you don't need to change, then enable object caching. Because what it will do is cache that object, and it won't render it next time, because it will already be rendered in the previous scene. So it saves rendering time, basically. Don't need to enable anything else here, but conserve memory if you need to conserve your RAM. Don't need to do that for me, because I've got 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM, which is amazing for 3D modeling, believe it or not, DDR4. Global illumination is the next tab. So everything on here is default at the top. Yep. The next thing, final gathering. We're going to click that to a low. Now, if you're making a final presentation, if this is your ultimate final that you are handing in as work, put it to very high. It will take a billion times longer to render, probably take a whole day or more, depending on your computer, but it will help. If you're doing it just as a draft sort of copy to show that you can do it, then you'll get away with low and draft. I'm going to do low. It will take significantly longer, but I can fast forward that. Like, you guys can have the benefits of me fast forwarding. There's also a fast forward option on YouTube that's sort of built in now. But we're going to click on diffuse bounces, scrolling down. So we're going to click diffuse bounces, and we're going to change that to 3. You can see typically a value of 4 and 7 is required for accurate interior renderings. True, unless you know how to cheat the lighting, which we're going to do. Nothing else needs to be changed here. Maybe the max reflections, we can change that to 3. We can turn down the refractions down to 3 as well. The max depth, we can change that down to 3. That will actually decrease the rendering time. I'm literally struggling with words today. I'm also biting my tongue. It's very strange. So everything on here looks fine. The next thing we want to do is double check the light. Make sure everything's selected carefully on there. Yep, that seems fine. Double check the material by pressing M. Now, by default, you will have a very strange window appearing, if I can bring it up. You'll have this window appearing when you press M by default. Now, when you click on moods, it's a new word for me, moods, yes, compact material editor, click on that, and by default, you will have this amount of slots. Now press X on the keyboard, and it will bring up a total of 18. Then you press X again on the keyboard, it will bring up 24. So you get way more like slots to apply materials to objects. Every time you change the slot in here, it will change the material that you've applied it to. So just be careful of that until like the final scene, until you've completely done it, save it as an external sort of 3D file. Then you can import it again into another file, and it already have the textures pre-baked onto it. Quite handy to do it that way. But that's another tutorial that we get onto that later. So make sure that the transparent one, which is just here, transparency, we want to have that sort of 70% because that's glass. Make sure it's two-sided, so that's quite handy. Don't need to change anything else. Nope. Just making sure everything's perfect. Like, you guys don't need to do anything really, unless you're sort of into being OCD about things like I am. I like to tweak around with a lot of things until I get everything perfect in an animation. Or I say animation, I mainly work on animations and environments. But we're going to render out this scene, and we're going to see what happens. I may have to fast forward this, because it may start corrupting my recording at this point, but it won't hinder the recording to a point where you can't see what's going on, because it will start sorting itself out. But let's press F9 and render the scene. So as you can see, it's finished rendering. Let's see how long that took. That took 33 seconds to render this scene. For me, that took too long. I'm not sure why. Probably because it's not utilizing my whole CPU, because I'm using 2 cores for recording and 10 cores for rendering. It's complicated to set up, but you don't really need to know that. But you can see the shadow's now casting some light. As you can see, it's reflecting some light onto the floor. That's kind of the idea we want, but then we've got this sort of weird pixelated effect. That's the shadow. That's not what we were looking for. So we're going to correct that. So we're going to apply a material to the wall. And the way we're going to do that is click Material 2, Material 72. No idea where it's Material 72. We're going to apply that to the wall and the floor and the ceiling and, like, well, we've only got walls and floor at the moment. We're going to click on, what should we apply it to? You know what? Paint flat. Simple. Plain and simple. Let's render this one out. We're still getting the pixelated effect with the light. So what we're going to do is change the light. We're going to change the shadows to ray traced shadows. And then we're just going to click render. So there you can see it's actually rendered the actual scene. It's rendered it fairly quickly as well. 31 seconds. We've increased it by 2 seconds. Still not good enough. There's a bit of specular going on. We're going to get that because the objects are not fully sort of NURBSed. It's complicated to use that term with you guys that don't quite understand it fully. But the sphere is looking pretty good. It's reflecting the objects. This is reflecting the green just there. I think we might make the object a bit more transparent if we can make it transparent more than that. Let's just click M. I'm going to make it transparent by clicking there. Putting it to 99%. Let's just render that out. It's kind of looking more like glass, but it's still not looking. That looks kind of good from this angle. You can see it's sort of got the outline of glass. Not fully transparent, but we're getting there. Translucency. Yeah. I'm sort of missing my words today. So, translucency, we're going to put that up to probably 70%. Turn down the transparency to about 93. And we're going to press render again. Rendering time was 31 seconds. What we're going to do as well, while we're doing this, while we're in this, is change the light quickly. And we're going to change something just down here. Make sure that something down here isn't ticked properly. Shadow parameters. Two-sided shadows. That's definitely what we want ticked. We definitely want that ticked. Be very helpful. Indirect illumination. Nope. Nope. Don't want any of that. Max cod tree depth. We're going to leave that default. We can put atmospheric shadows on. Kind of helps. Don't have to have it on. Just makes things look slightly better. Everything else is set to default pretty much. Yep. So now let's press render. Make sure this window is selected. We're also going to press C on the keyboard. That will add a camera to the scene. No cameras in scene. So press Control C. That will add the camera to the scene. As you can see, the camera's here. It's all set up. So the target distance. This is where it can become really interesting. You can create a focus point and make things out of focus and not in focus. It's kind of cool. So what we're going to do is, where's the focus point? I'm trying to work out where the focus point is. Nope, we want the camera to be there. And we're going to press P, or you can press just physical camera box here. Click on perspective, press P, and it allows you to move it around. We want to see where the focus point actually is of this camera. The focus point is in there somewhere. It's there. Very fiddly to get to. But we're going to drag it to there. We're going to have it round about. We're going to have it focusing just at the front here. The object at the back is going to be out of focus. So the way we're going to do that, click on the camera. The actual camera, just there. We can leave it at 3mm, that's fine. Field of view, that's fine. The focus. Enable depth of field. There we go, we got depth of field enabled now. And anything else? Don't need to enable motion blur because we don't have an animation. Got bokeh, depth of field. Don't need to really use anything with that. Lens distortion, miscellaneous. Nope, that's fine. So default camera, there we go. So click on F9, renders a scene. So there you go. This is my final scene. The object at the back is out of focus, and the objects at the front are in focus. We've got a specular going on, so it kind of looks like something's reflecting off there and bouncing into things and so on. These objects are reflecting and refracting light. This object is looking just like glass, not fully transparent. I don't know why I'm zooming in and out like that. That's the quality of me zooming in and out, so don't be worried about how pixelated it is. It's at 720p. If you've started rendering it at 1080p and beyond that, then yes, it will look a billion times better when you zoom in, but that's just generally the pixel count when zooming in and out. But as you can see, the scene looks pretty decent, so we're going to leave it at that for now for this tutorial. We're setting up a very simple scene. Looks kind of professional, at the same time it doesn't look professional because we've got a teapot in the scene that doesn't look anything like a teapot. We're going to change this, and I think we're going to have it at stone, just pure stone. And let's render this one out, see what that looks like, make that our final object. So there you go, looks a little bit better now. This object isn't now sort of reflecting. A teapot doesn't generally reflect unless it is a shiny teapot, but we're going to have it sort of bland stone object. Then we've got a reflecting object and a semi-reflecting object that's sort of a glass sort of texture. We can make it more transparent than that, but that's in another tutorial. I'm not going to show you that now. That can get complicated to set up. Let's just see if we can do it quickly now. See if there's any options in here. Literally no options in here. Right? Yep. Black material is opaque. See if that works. If that works, I'll actually be amazed. So as you can see, it hasn't fully made it transparent, and there's something going on here. I think it's trying to sort of render that scene. Oh, wow. Oh, I know what it was. It's because we flagged it as opaque. But anyway, you get the picture. Basically, the scene, we got depth of field with the camera, and we got the light set up to give us decent shadows, decent looking shadows, specular light coming off the coming off the objects, refracting and reflecting light in different angles, and a teapot in the scene. The teapot's important. But you can see the spherical object looks pretty cool. The light is, believe it or not, the light source. You can disable that in the actual, like, in a way where it doesn't display here. But you don't need to worry about that for now. In the next tutorial, if you guys want to see me do that, I will make the scene a little bit more optimized and show you how to animate and how to animate a very simple motion. For example, possibly the sphere lifting up into the torus, or a teapot pouring into the torus or into a cup. Maybe just keeping the default with the scene and putting the sphere into there. But we create a little animation for you and show you how the animating works, and rendering out scenes very quickly and very fast. But for now, guys, if you enjoyed this short tutorial, then hit that like button, click that thumbs button on the down below, literally down below to that side. And the subscribe button's just down here, so you can click just here. The subscribe button will help me out a lot. If you guys really did enjoy it, then drop a comment and let me know what other tutorials you want to see me do, because I can do a hell of a lot in 3ds Max. I'm just showing you the basics. I'm not particularly great at giving tutorials, as you can probably hear, because I don't script it. I literally just say what I'm showing you. So yeah, there is that. But if you guys got any tips on how to improve that, then let me know in the comment section down below. That would really help. Also follow me on Twitter, because I do update quite a lot on Twitter. I do prefer Twitter to other social media platforms like Facebook. I do post to Facebook as well. I've got a Facebook page. Check that out. That's in the links in the description down below. And I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.